Hey everybody.
Pat Fine's here.
I'm Mary Beth.
And I'm Laura.
Laura, welcome back.
Welcome back, everybody.
It's, our podcast, Tales from the Put-Out Closet.
Tales from the Put-Out Closet.
We're really glad that you're joining us.
Our first tale that we're covering.
That's right.
Frankenstein.
Yes, so we're diving right back into Frankenstein. This week we're on chapter 3.
Yes, maybe. And I think we've got time to do chapter 4.
Laura thinks we're going to go for chapter 3 and 4.
We're getting ready to get to the good stuff.
Oh my gosh.
I think.
Okay. All right. So if you're joining us on YouTube, be sure to let us know what you think so far in the comments below. If you're joining us elsewhere, we would love for you to come over and subscribe to our channel, Fatbird Finds. It would be great. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So I'm going to let you take it away with chapter 3.
Okay. I will start. Should we talk for just a second about where we were?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead and recap.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, we were just in the middle of his idyllic childhood that he was having, and he's gotten older, and they had this experience out in nature. Oh, we talked about the lords of his imagination. Mm-hmm. Those people he was reading.
Yes.
And his dad called them trash.
Yeah.
And then
they've adopted a little sister.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And they went out on this outing, and they had this experience in this thunderstorm and with the lightning, and they had some scholar with them or something, and he explained all of this interesting stuff to Victor, and now he's like thrown down the lords of his imagination, and he has thrown down his natural history element, and he's gone strictly to the math and science.
Yes.
All
right.
Okay.
Let's do it. Let's jump right back in.
Okay. When I had attained the age of 17, my parents resolved that I should become a student at the University of Ingolstadt. I had hitherto attended the schools of Geneva, but my father thought it necessary for the completion of my education that I should be made acquainted with other customs than those of my native country. My departure was therefore fixed at an early date, but before the day resolved upon could arrive, the first misfortune of my life occurred. An omen, as it were, of my future misery.
Oh, no.
Oh, God.
An omen.
Elizabeth had caught the scarlet fever.
Oh, no.
Her illness was severe, and she was in the greatest danger.
Elizabeth is the sister.
Yes. The adopted one.
The adopted sister,
yes.
But she's a vision.
She's so lovely. Oh, my swelling heart.
Right.
During her illness, many arguments had been urged to persuade my mother to refrain from attending upon her. She had at first yielded to our entreaties, but when she heard that the life of her favorite was menaced, she could no longer control her anxiety. She attended her sick bed. Her watchful attentions triumphed over the malignity of the distemper. Elizabeth was saved, but the consequences of this imprudence were fatal to her preserver.
Oh, no. So it's like COVID. You try to tell the older people to stay away and, mind their business, but, it doesn't always work that way.
Right. And I mean, gosh, if the mother's not going to take care of the child, I don't know who
exactly
is expected to. I mean,
and you can't expect a mother to not, nurse
exactly.
or see to her child.
Exactly. On the third day, my mother sickened. Her fever was accompanied by the most alarming symptoms, and the looks of her medical attendants prognosticated the worst event.
Oh, no.
On her deathbed, the fortitude and benignity of this best of women did not desert her. She joined the hands of Elizabeth and myself. "My children," she said, "my firmest hopes of future happiness were placed on the prospect of your union. This expectation will now be the consolation of your father. Elizabeth, my love, you must supply my place to my younger children. Alas, I regret that I am taken from you, and happy and beloved as I have been, is it not hard to quit you all? But these are not thoughts befitting me. I will endeavor to resign myself cheerfully to death, and will indulge a hope of meeting you in another world."
Oh, man.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. He has to make an appearance in every episode. He just can't stand it.
I know. Booed. We're talking about the scarlet fever.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a lot. And that's a lot for those kids. I mean, of course they're going to have to get married now.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
She died calmly, and her countenance expressed affection even in death. I need not describe the feelings of those whose dearest ties are rent by that most irreparable evil, the void that presents itself to the soul, and the despair that is exhibited on the countenance. It is so long before the mind can persuade itself that she, whom we saw every day, and whose very existence appeared a part of our own, could have departed forever, that the brightness of a beloved eye can have been extinguished, and the sound of a voice so familiar and dear to the ear can be hushed, never more to be heard. These are the reflections of the first days, but when the lapse of time proves the reality of the evil, then the actual bitterness of grief commences.
Can I just say that I think Mary Shelley's favorite word is countenance. She has said it a lot.
She does say it a lot.
So it's a drinking game now. I have a glass of water, but
okay.
I will be drinking every time she says countenance from now on.
Okay. One of our lights went out. Is that going to be okay with you?
Yeah,
okay.
It's okay. They're battery operated, so your
okay.
battery went out.
Okay.
It'll be fine.
Okay. It's moody anyway. It's
moody.
It's a moody story.
It's getting spooky. Laura's light went out.
The closer to Halloween we get, the spookier. Maybe we'll have some sort of spooky light or something.
Ooh.
Okay. Yet from whom has not that rude hand rent away some dear connection? And why should I describe a sorrow which we all have felt and must feel? The time at length arrives when grief is rather an indulgence than a necessity, and the smile that plays upon the lips, although it may be deemed a sacrilege, is not banished. My mother was dead, but we had all still duties which we ought to perform. We must continue our course with the rest, and learn to think ourselves fortunate, whilst one remains whom the spoiler had not seized. Okay. So he's just describing getting through the grief of losing his mother.
Mm-hmm.
My departure for Ingolstadt, which had been deferred by these events, was now again determined upon. I obtained from my father a respite of some weeks. It appeared to me sacrilege so soon to leave the repose, akin to death, of the house of mourning, and to rush into the thick of life. I was new to sorrow, but it did not the less alarm me. I was unwilling to quit the sight of those that remained to me, and above all, I desired to see my sweet Elizabeth in some degree consoled. That would be hard.
That would be hard. I mean, he's had like a perfect life.
Yeah.
His whole life.
And his whole household is in, chaos.
Yeah.
Practically. She indeed veiled her grief and strove to act the comforter to us all. She looked steadily on life and assumed its duties with courage and zeal. She devoted herself to those whom she had been taught to call her uncle and cousins. Never was she so enchanting as at this time, when she recalled the sunshine of her smiles and spent them upon us. She forgot even her own regret in her endeavors to make us forget. The day of my departure at length arrived. Clerval spent the last evening with us. That's his best friend, you remember? Okay.
Yep.
He had endeavored to persuade his father to permit him to accompany me and to become my fellow student, but in vain. His father was a narrow-minded traitor and saw idleness and ruin in the aspirations and ambitions of his son.
Oh, my God.
Oh, he thought he was just being lazy, just wanted to go to school. Henry deeply felt the misfortune of being debarred from a liberal education. He said little, but when he spoke, I read it in his kindling eye and in his animated glance, a restrained but firm resolve not to be chained to the miserable details of commerce. We sat late. We could not tear ourselves away from each other, nor persuade ourselves to say the word farewell. It was said, and we retired under the pretense of seeking repose, each fancying that the other was deceived. But when at morning's down I descended to the carriage which was to convey me away, they were all there, my father again to bless me, Clerval to press my hand once more, my Elizabeth to renew her entreaties that I would write often, and to bestow the last feminine attentions on her playmate and friend.
That's hard.
That's bad, right?
It's hard going off to school.
Oh, my swelling heart.
I didn't like going off to school, and I wasn't even going very far away.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really hard. I think I felt the same way. I threw myself. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Yeah, because my grandmother was sick at the time, so it's kind of the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
My whole family would be at her house because she was sick, and that was a lot, like 20 people.
Yeah.
And my mom, back then, we didn't have cell phone. I was just like on the party line at school or whatever. But then at home, everybody would pass the phone around.
Yeah.
To see how I was doing. And I was like,
cute.
oh, gosh. Okay. I threw myself into the chase that was to convey me away and indulged in the most melancholy reflections. I, who had ever been surrounded by amiable companions, continually engaged in endeavoring to bestow mutual pleasure, I was now alone. In the university whither I was going, I must form my own friends and be my own protector. My life had hitherto been remarkably secluded and domestic, and this had given me invincible repugnance to new countenances. There's your word again.
Drink.
Drink. I loved my brothers, Elizabeth and Clerval. These were old familiar faces, but I believed myself totally unfitted for the company of strangers. Such were my reflections as I commenced my journey. But as I proceeded, my spirits and hopes rose. I ardently desired the acquisition of knowledge. I had often, when at home, thought it hard to remain during my youth cooped up in one place, and had longed to enter the world and take my station among other human beings. Now my desires were complied with, and it would indeed have been folly to repeat.
Folly.
Repent, I mean. What did I say?
Folly.
You like that word?
I do.
Okay. I had sufficient leisure for these and many other reflections during my journey to Ingolstadt, which was long and fatiguing. I wonder how far he had to go.
I don't know, but any sort of journey I would imagine in the 1800s would be quite fatiguing.
I mean, right? You can't just stop at the minute mark or whatever.
Get yourself
out and stretch your legs.
a drink and get yourself a coffee.
Yeah, it's probably exhausting, and you're probably like dusty and dirty and stuff at the end of it.
Yeah.
At length, the high white steeple of the town met my eyes. I alighted and was conducted to my solitary apartment to spend the evening as I pleased. The next morning, I delivered my letters of introduction and paid a visit to some of the principal professors. Chance, or rather the evil influence, the angel of destruction, which asserted omnipotent sway over me from the moment I returned my reluctant steps from my father's door.
Goodness.
Led me first to...
That's his description of Chance? Oh, now my light went out. It's really getting spooky.
Now it's really going to be moody.
Oh my gosh.
That's his description, yeah. The angel of destruction. So that's all that foreshadowing again.
You said angel of destruction and my light went out.
Ooh.
What does it mean?
I don't know.
It means something.
Yeah, maybe we're in for something bad.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. Master Krimp, professor of natural philosophy. He was an uncouth man, but deeply imbued in the secrets of his science. He asked me several questions concerning my progress in the different branches of science appertaining to natural philosophy. I replied carelessly and partly in contempt, mentioned the names of my alchemists as the principal authors I had studied. Those lords of his imagination, you know. The professor stared. Have you, he said, really spent your time in studying such nonsense?
Such nonsense.
It's trash.
It's garbage.
I replied in the affirmative. Every minute, continued Master Krimp with warmth. Every instant that you have wasted on those books is utterly and entirely lost.
That's preposterous.
You have burdened your memory with exploded systems and useless names.
What
Good
a
God.
racket. Oh my gosh. How could you be so stupid? Is what he's saying.
I know. That's what he said. Good God. In what desert land have you lived where no one was kind enough to inform you that these fancies which you have so greedily imbibed are 1,000 years old and as musty as they are ancient?
Musty trash.
I little expected in this enlightened and scientific age to find a disciple of Albertus Magnus and Paracelsus. My dear sir, you must begin your studies entirely anew.
Oh, God. He's like, you got to start over, dude. You've been reading the wrong stuff. You're following the wrong crowd.
He's so disappointed.
Yeah. Well, that would really be shitty, though. It's your first day of class, and you're like, but what about these guys? They're my heroes. And your teacher is just like, that is some real trash and garbage. And he probably said it in front of everybody.
Yeah.
That's really shocking.
And really deflating, right?
Yeah. I would just go home.
So saying, he stepped aside and wrote down a list of several books treating of natural philosophy, which he desired me to procure, and dismissed me after mentioning that in the beginning of the following week he intended to commence a course of lectures upon natural philosophy in its general relations, and that Master Waldman, a fellow professor, would lecture upon chemistry the alternate days that he omitted. Okay. So he's planned out his course. Mm-hmm. I returned home not disappointed, for I have said that I had long considered those authors useless whom the professor reprobated, but I returned not at all the more inclined to recur to these studies in any shape. Master Crimp was a little squat man with a gruff voice and a repulsive countenance. The teacher, therefore, did not prepossess me in favor of his pursuits. In rather a too philosophical and connected a strain, perhaps, I have given an account of the conclusions I had come to concerning them in my early years. As a child, I had not been content with the results promised by the modern professors of natural science. With a confusion of ideas only to be accounted for by my extreme youth and my want of a guide on such matters, I had retrod the steps of knowledge along the paths of time and exchanged the discoveries of recent inquirers for the dreams of forgotten alchemists. Besides, I had a contempt for the uses of modern natural philosophy. It was very different when the matters of the science sought immortality and power. Such views, though futile, were grand, and now the scene was changed. The ambition of the inquirer seemed to limit itself to the annihilation of those visions on which my interest in science was chiefly founded. I was required to exchange chimeras of boundless grandeur for realities of little worth.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's just mad. He's mad that guy, yelled at him about the lords of his imagination, although he had already given them up anyway.
Yeah, it's true. Mm-hmm. It's true.
Such were my reflections during the first 2 or 3 days of my residence at Ingolstadt, which were chiefly spent in becoming acquainted with the localities and the principal residents in my new abode. But as the ensuing week commenced, I thought of the information which Master Crimp had given me concerning the lectures, and although I could not consent to go and hear that little conceited fellow deliver sentences out of a pulpit, I recollected that he had what he had said of Master Waldman, whom I had never seen, as he had hitherto been out of town.
Oh.
So he's holding out hope. He doesn't like the one guy that yelled at him, but he's hoping his other professor is going to be better.
Right, but he's out of town.
Yes. Partly from curiosity and partly from idleness, I went into the lecturing room, which Master Waldman entered shortly after. This professor was very unlike his colleague. He appeared about 50 years of age, but was an aspect expressive of the greatest benevolence.
Oh.
Another word that Mary Shelley uses all the time.
Benevolence?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A few gray hairs covered his temples, but those at the back of his head were nearly black. His person was short, but remarkably erect, and his voice the sweetest I had ever heard.
What about his countenance?
You need another drink?
Yeah.
He began his lecture by a recapitulation of the history of chemistry and the various improvements made by different men of learning, pronouncing with fervor the names of the most distinguished discoverers. He then took a cursory view of the present state of the science and explained many of its elementary terms. After having made a few preparatory experiments, he concluded with a panegyric upon modern chemistry, the terms of which I shall never forget.
Oh, he's smitten already.
He likes this one way better.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I guess this is the professor
that was out of town.
Yeah, this is him speaking.
Okay.
The ancient teachers of this science, said he, promised impossibilities and performed nothing. The modern masters promise very little. They know that metals cannot be transmuted and that the elixir of life is a chimera. But these philosophers whose hands seem only made to dabble in dirt and their eyes to pore over the microscope or crucible have indeed performed miracles. They penetrate into the recesses of nature and show how she works in her hiding places. They ascend into the heavens. They have discovered how the blood circulates and the nature of the air we breathe. They have acquired new and almost unlimited powers. They can command the thunders of heaven, mimic the earthquake, and even mock the invisible world with its own shadows. Wow.
Goodness.
Remember, we're like in the 1800s here.
Right.
Such were the professor's words. Rather, let me say, such the words of the fate announced to destroy me. So, yeah. Remember, all of this he's telling to the captain of the boat, right? So, all the time he's preparing his friend to, that something terrible is going to happen. Okay. I lost my place.
Laura.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to just start here. Such were the professor's words. Rather, let me say, such the words of the fate and announced to destroy me. As he went on, I felt as if my soul were grappling with a palpable enemy. One by one, the various keys were touched, which formed the mechanism of my being.
I thought you said this chapter was short.
It is. That's the end of it right
You're
there.
a liar. Okay.
Chord after chord was sounded, and soon my mind was filled with one thought, one conception, one purpose. So much had been done, exclaimed the soul of Frankenstein. More, far more will I achieve. Treading in the steps already marked, I will pioneer a new way, explore unknown powers, and unfold to the world the deepest mysteries of creation. Is that the first time they've said Frankenstein?
I'm not sure.
Me either.
Great question.
I closed not my eyes that night. My internal being was in a state of insurrection and turmoil. I felt that order would thence arise, but I had no power to produce it. By degrees, after the morning's dawn, sleep came. I awoke, and my yesternight's thoughts were as a dream. They only remained a resolution to return to my ancient studies and to devote myself to a science for which I believed myself to possess a natural talent. On the same day, I paid Master Waldman a visit. His manners in private were even more mild and attractive than in public, for there was a certain dignity in his mien during his lecture, which in his own house was replaced by the greatest affability and kindness. I gave him pretty nearly the same account of my former pursuits as I had given to his fellow professor. He heard with attention the little narration concerning my studies and smiled at the names of Cornelius Agrippa and Paracelsus, but without the contempt that Master Crimp had exhibited. He said that these were men to whose indefatigable zeal modern philosophers were indebted for most of the foundations of their knowledge. They had left to us as an easier task to give new names and arrange in connected classifications the facts which they in a great degree had been their instruments of bringing to light. The labors of men of genius, however erroneously directed, scarcely ever fail in ultimately turning to the solid advantage of mankind.
Goodness, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
That's a mouthful.
They have to talk so fancy because
They
they're
do.
professors.
Exactly.
I'll be glad to get through the professor portion of
Yeah, I'm
this.
glad you're reading that part.
I listened to his statement, which was delivered without any presumption or affectation, and then added that his lecture had removed any prejudices against modern chemists. I expressed myself in measured terms, with the modesty and deference due from a youth to his instructor, without letting escape. Inexperience in life would have made me ashamed. Any of the enthusiasm which stimulated my intended labors. I requested his advice concerning the books I ought to procure. So he's trying to impress his professor without acting like a crazy kid.
Yeah.
I am happy, said Master Waldman, to have gained a disciple, and if your application equals your ability, I have no doubt of your success. Chemistry is that branch of natural philosophy in which the greatest improvements have been and may be made. It is on that account that I have made it my peculiar study, but at the same time I have not neglected the other branches of science. A man would make but a very sorry chemist if he attended to that department of human knowledge alone. If your wish is to become really a man of science and not merely a petty experimentalist, I should advise you to apply to every branch of natural philosophy, including mathematics.
Okay.
He then took me into his laboratory and explained to me the uses of his various machines, instructing me as to what I ought to procure, and promising me the use of his own when I should have advanced far enough in the science not to derange their mechanism. So you don't mess anything up. He also gave me the list of books which I had requested, and I took my leave. Thus ended a day memorable to me. It decided my future destiny.
Okay. The
Dun, dun,
stage
dun.
the stage is set.
The stage is said he has his laboratory.
Laboratory.
He has that all set to go.
Yeah. So, yeah.
He has a new hero.
I have a feeling I know what's going to happen.
He has a new idol,
Yeah.
Master Waldman.
Yeah. Chapter 4. From this day, natural philosophy, and particularly chemistry, in the most comprehensive sense of the term, became nearly my sole occupation. I read with ardor these works, so full of genius and discrimination, which modern inquirers have written on those subjects. I attended the lectures and cultivated the acquaintance of the men of science of the university, and I found even in M. Crimp a great deal of ground sense and real information, combined, it is true, with a repulsive physiognomy and manners, but not on that account the less valuable. In M. Waldman I found a true friend. His gentleness was never tinged by dogmatism, and his instructions were given with an air of frankness and good nature that banished every idea of pedantry.
So he liked one and he didn't like the other.
Exactly.
And I think, don't you think M is the abbreviation for master? I think it is.
I guess so.
I think that's what they called professor or something like
When
that.
you read it, did you say master instead of M?
That's what I said.
Oh. I didn't realize you had done that.
I know.
I feel like an idiot.
Well, I just kind of winged it.
Master.
Maybe that's not what it means.
Mister.
Do you want to put that in the comments, people?
Monsignor. It was a joke.
Just kidding.
Okay, now I've lost my place.
I'm sorry. That was my fault. I did it.
In 1,000 ways, he smoothed for me a path of knowledge and made the most abstruse inquiries clear and facile to my apprehension. My application was at first flatulating and uncertain. I can't say this word. It was not flatulating. But that's what it looks like it says. Fluctuating.
Uh-huh.
I can't. I'm sorry. It's let's just pretend it's flatulating.
Yeah, these couple chapters are very... The first few were not this difficult. Now we're getting into some really...
they're in school now, so they've got to sound as fancy as possible.
Exactly.
My application was at first fluctuating and uncertain. It gained strength as I proceeded, and soon became so ardent and eager that the stars often disappeared in the light of morning, whilst I yet engaged in my laboratory.
Oh man! So I mean, in modern slang, he's here for it. He has found his true passion in life, and he is working through the night feverishly.
Yes.
And just with no regard of the time of day that it is.
He's lost himself.
He has. He's done it.
As I applied so closely, it may be easily conceived that my progress was rapid. My ardor, he says ardor a lot too.
He does.
She does. My ardor was indeed the astonishment of the students, and my proficiency that of the masters. Professor Crimp often asked me, with a sly smile, how Cornelius Agrippa went on. whilst Master Waldman expressed that the most heartfelt exultation in my progress. 2 years passed in this manner, during which I paid no visit to Geneva, but was engaged heart and soul in the pursuit of some discoveries which I hope to make.
Oh, did he say 2 years?
2 years he's been there.
That's a long time.
He has not visited home.
Good grief.
And I mean, let's remember that he left home in the midst of a tragedy.
In the midst of a tragedy, I mean, he's promised his mom to, marry Elizabeth.
Yeah.
But his dad sent him on to school 2 years. And I mean, this is not in the age of cell phones.
Exactly.
I mean, he might be writing a letter here and there. That's about it.
Yeah. None but those who have experienced them can conceive the enticements of science. In other studies, you go as far as others have gone before you, and there is nothing more to know. But in a scientific pursuit, there is continual food for discovery and wonder. A mind of moderate capacity, which closely pursued one study, must infallibly arrive at great proficiency in that study. And I, who continually sought the attainment of one object of pursuit, and was solely wrapped up in this, improved so rapidly that at the end of 2 years I made some discoveries in the improvement of some chemical instruments, which procured me great esteem and admiration at the university. When I had arrived at this point, and had become well acquainted in the theory and practice of natural philosophy, as depended on the lessons of any of the professors, my residence there being no longer conducive to my improvements, I thought of returning to my friends and my native town, when an incident happened.
Oh.
That protracted my stay.
Oh, dear.
An incident has happened. One of the phenomena which had peculiarly.
They use the word.
That's hard to say.
They use the word peculiar. I think instead of particular.
Peculiarly. I said it that time.
Yes.
Peculiarly. One of the phenomena which had particularly attract my attention was the structure of the human frame, and indeed any animal endued with life. Whence I often ask myself, did the principle of life proceed? It was a bold question, and one which had never been considered as a mystery. Yet with how many things are we upon the brink of becoming acquainted, if cowardice or carelessness did not restrain our inquiries? Here's my question.
Interesting.
Is Mary Shelley into this stuff? Like herself? Does she have these thoughts? I mean, she has to if she wrote about them.
Oh, I would assume so.
I mean, I feel like she's the one that's curious about, like, can you build a man out of nothing? I feel like I feel like it's her.
Right?
Yeah. I wish she had written this from a woman's perspective. But, I mean, I guess that wouldn't have been realistic at the time.
Exactly. And I think that as far as I can tell, when people read and discuss the book, they talk about that. They talk about what a striking feminist background that she came from.
Yeah.
Her mother died before she really knew her, but she was an extreme feminist for the time. But she doesn't write strong female characters in the book at all.
I guess it wouldn't have been accepted probably at the time.
Yeah, maybe not.
I don't know. Who knows? I revolved these circumstances in my mind and determined thenceforth to apply myself more particularly. Hey, he really did say particularly that time. More particularly to those branches of natural philosophy which relate to physiology. Unless I had been animated by an almost supernatural enthusiasm, my application to this study would have been irksome and almost intolerable. To examine the causes of life, we must first have recourse to death. I became acquainted with the science of anatomy, but this was not sufficient. I must also observe the natural decay and corruption of the human body. In my education, my father had taken the greatest precautions that my mind should be impressed with no supernatural horrors. I do not ever remember to have trembled at a tale of superstition or to have feared the apparition of a spirit. Darkness had no effect upon my fancy, and a churchyard was to me merely the receptacle of bodies deprived of life, which from being the seat of beauty and strength had become food for the worm.
I find that really hard to believe.
Yeah, I kind of do too, because he's a dreamer, or he has been a dreamer in his life.
And they talk earlier in the book about him being interested in the spiritual realm or whatever. You know, like kind of, I mean,
I guess maybe he's interested in the spiritual realm from like from the occult standpoint, but not maybe of the macabre standpoint.
Oh, maybe so.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we take for granted the amount of that kind of stuff that we are subjected to. Like we've been, what do you call it? We've just gotten used to it, you know, desensitized. We've been desensitized by all these horror movies and The Walking Dead and all that stuff with all that gross stuff. This was probably really, you know, I don't know, that they just probably weren't exposed to a lot of that unless.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Now I was led to examine the cause and progress of this decay, and forced to spend my days and nights in vaults and charnel houses. Charnel houses.
What is that?
I don't know. Charnel. I don't know what's a charnel houses.
I wonder if it's carnal, but I don't know.
My attention.
We're going to look that up later.
We'll have to look that up later. Let us know in the comments down below. My attention was fixed upon every object, the most insupportable to the delicacy of human feelings. I saw how the fine form of a man was degraded and wasted. I beheld the corruption of death succeed to the blooming cheek of life. I saw how the worm inherited the wonders of the eye and brain.
Ooh.
I paused, examining and analyzing all the minutia of causation, and exemplified in the change from life to death and death to life.
Ew.
Until from the midst of this darkness a sudden light broke in me. A light so brilliant and wondrous, yet so simple, that while I became dizzy with the immensity of the prospect with which it illustrated, I was surprised that among so many men of genius who had directed their inquiries toward the same science, that I alone would be reserved to discover so astonishing a secret.
I was just like, come on. He's like, he's having a moment.
That was a long sentence.
It's like a eureka kind of moment. He's having a revelation.
He has had a light bulb go off.
Yes.
Like, I think literally.
Yes.
Remember, I am not recording the vision of a madman. The sun does not more certainly shine in the heavens than which I affirm it is true. Some miracle might have produced it, yet the stages of discovery were distinct and probable. After days and nights of incredible labor and fatigue, I succeeded in discovering the cause of generation and life. Nay, more, I became myself capable of bestowing animation upon lifeless matter. How?
We jumped right to that.
Well, you just kind of shuffled over that.
Right?
I didn't really say how he did it.
I'm really shocked. He had all this flowery language for this revelation. But I mean, somehow he's figured out how to reanimate lifeless material.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I mean,
Mr. Frankenstein. All right.
I think he's delusional.
The astonishment which I had first experienced in this discovery soon gave place to delight and rapture.
Oh, no.
After much time spent in painful labor, to arrive at once at the summit of my desires was the most gratifying consummation of my toils. But this discovery was so great and overwhelming that all the steps by which I had progressively led to it were obliterated, and I beheld only the result.
Well, there you go. He didn't want to talk about all the steps up in between. He just, all that matters is that he did it.
Yes. What had been the study and desire of the wisest men since the creation of the world was now within my grasp. Not that, like a magic scene, it all opened up in me at once. The information I had obtained was of nature, rather to direct my endeavors as soon as I point them towards the object of my search, than to exhibit that object already accomplished. I was like the Arabian, who had been buried with the dead and found passage to life, aided only by one glimmering and seemingly ineffectual light. It's so poetic.
Wow.
He's really excited for himself.
I mean, has he spent these 2 years just him in this laboratory, just shut up in there with all these inanimate objects, and now he's exploded into
he's excited.
some kind of rapturous state.
Yeah. I see by your eagerness and the wonder and hope which your eyes express, my friend, that you expect to be informed of the secret with which I am acquainted. That cannot be.
Oh.
Listen patiently until the end of my story. I feel like he's talking to me.
I know.
Right?
Because you asked.
I did. Listen patiently until the end of my story, and you will easily perceive why I am reserved upon that subject. I will not lead you on, unguarded and ardent as I was then, to your destruction and infallible misery. Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example, how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man who believes his native town to be the world than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. So he's like, I probably should have stayed home. At this point, he's like, you know what?
Exactly. He's like, I can tell that you really are excited for me, but
yeah, he's like, it's not so bad. Your hometown, it's probably fine.
You should just chill.
When I found so astonishing a power placed within my hands, I mean, he's still going. He's like really excited about this, but he's like, don't follow my footsteps. But I'm so excited about it. But let me warn you about, what we're talking about here. But oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, he's really reliving the power of the moment, I think, for the captain.
When I found so astonishing a power placed within my hands, I hesitated a long time concerning the manner in which I should employ it. Although I possess...
I would think so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to, have a little blob or something in a test tube that you animate. It's another thing to, reanimate a frog or something. But I feel like he's
Pet Cemetery style.
Yeah, I feel like he's going to jump right to the big guns, though. I have a feeling. Although I possess the capacity of bestowing animation, yet to prepare a frame for the reception of it with all its intricacies, thank you. When these words are hyphenated, I just can't even.
Yeah.
And all its... Say it again.
Intricacies.
I swear I can't see it good when they're hyphenated. Of fibers, muscles, and veins still remained a work of inconceivable difficulty and labor. I doubted at first whether I should attempt the creation of a being like myself or one of simpler organisms. I think simpler is better.
I think you should have taken a step back.
I mean, I don't feel like you should try to make something like yourself, right off the bat.
Yeah. You know what I think is happening here? I mean, he doesn't say it, but I think we could safely assume that, he really didn't get over the loss of his mother before he was thrown into this.
True.
And I feel like that he's obsessed with nobody else dying.
Yeah.
With he with himself being the person who discovers how to reanimate anybody that dies
or prolong life. I mean, think about it. Just kind of think about it for a minute. I mean, everybody's thought of this, I'm sure. But what is existence? What is a human life? Is it your brain? Is it your... nobody knows. Mm-hmm. So, there has to be, you would think, a way to like put yourself into something else to prolong your life. You would think. But is there? I mean, what makes a person? Nobody knows the answer to that. I just think it's fascinating.
It's very, yeah. I mean, that could be a whole podcast in and of itself right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought of like head transplants? I mean, okay, so if it were possible.
Yes, I have thought about that.
If it were possible, you and I are severed surgically and swapped.
Oh, God.
Are you me and I'm you now, or do we remain who we are? What is it that makes us who we are? Like, what part of us?
Well, I mean, I guess your identity would have to go with your brain. Right?
Does it, though?
I mean, what difference does an arm make?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
what if it has to do with your heart? What if your soul lives in your heart?
Well, that's different.
Nobody knows. It's just fascinating. Anyway, I've definitely lost my place this time.
It's somewhere where the intricacies were happening there.
Yeah. I doubted at first whether I should. Oh, yeah. He's doubting whether he should try to make something like himself or a simpler organism.
Yeah, we're trying to urge him to go simpler.
Yeah, but my imagination was much too exalted by my first success to permit me to doubt of my ability to give life to an animal as complex as wonderful as man.
Oh my gosh.
As complex and wonderful as man.
He's gone.
The materials at present within my command hardly appeared adequate to so arduous an undertaking. They say that word a lot too. Arduous. But I doubted not that I should ultimately succeed. I prepared myself for a multitude of reserves. My operations might be incessantly baffled, and at last my work to be imperfect. Yet when I considered the improvement which every day takes place in science and mechanics, I was encouraged to hope my present attempts would at least lay the foundations of future success. Nor could I consider the magnitude and complexity of my plan as any argument of its impracticability. It was these feelings that I began. It was with these feelings that I began the creation of a human being.
Oh my gosh.
As the minuteness of the parts formed a great hindrance to my speed, I resolved, contrary to my first intention, to make the being of a gigantic stature, that is to say about 8 feet in height and proportionately large.
So, in the spirit of it being a spooky season, to get kind of spooky, do you remember when we watched American Horror Story? And we watched the Coven, season, and she gets in there and puts together
like her perfect
person, like from all the pieces of the bodies in the morgue or whatever. Yeah. And he's so pitiful,
yeah.
He's this
he
creature.
Doesn't know what he is.
Well, I never realized until we were reading this book. I really think it's that story.
Yeah,
I mean, I think they did that on purpose.
Yeah, I think so too.
And it really follows this story.
I think you're right. Okay, so we've got a proportionately large person.
That just reminded me because the proportions and stuff on that in that story for American Horror Story were really something.
After having formed this determination and having spent some months in successfully collecting and arranging my materials, I began.
My materials.
No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards like a hurricane in the first enthusiasm of success. Life and death appeared to me in ideal bounds, which I should first break through and pour a torrent of light into a dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source.
Wow.
Oh, no. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Man, that is cocky.
Right?
The audacity.
I'm going to call bullshit on Mary Shelley for just a second.
Are you?
Yeah, because I think that after all the stuff that happens to him in this story, I mean, spoiler alert, I'm not going to say exactly what happens, but all this doom and gloom that he's foreshadowed and all this misery. Can he really? I bet he's not in any shape to recall all this exuberant, cocky.
Well, he's a man. So, I mean, he's probably, reliving his heyday. He's like, I was on top of the world before I wasn't.
Yeah, maybe that's just a man thing.
Maybe Mary Shelley knew exactly what she was doing. Now I've lost my place again, Laura.
It's all my fault.
It really is. Okay, yeah, he's saying that all of these beings would owe their, life to him.
Yeah. He's created a new species is what he said, I think.
Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in the process of time, although I now found it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. So yeah, you're right. He's trying to find a way to, delete death from existence.
I think he's had a real, I think he's got real huge grief issues at this point in his life where he's trying to control. And see, Mary Shelley had these grief issues when she was writing because she lost a child. And
yeah.
Yeah.
These thoughts supported my spirits while I pursued my undertaking with unremitting ardor. My cheek had grown pale with study, and my person had become emaciated with confinement. Sometimes on the very brink of certainty I failed, yet still I clung to the hope which the next day or the next hour might realize. One secret which I alone possessed was the hope to which I had dedicated myself, and the moon gazed on my midnight labors, while with unrelaxed and breathless eagerness I pursued nature to her hiding places. Who shall conceive the horrors of my secret toil as I dabbled among the unhallowed damps of the grave or tortured the living animal to animate their lifeless clay?
Ew.
My limbs now tremble and my eyes swim with the remembrance. But then...
She's looking at me like...
I was trying to make it like really... But then... I don't think it's an exciting part, but he did say, but then... But then an almost frantic impulse urged me forward. I seemed to have lost all soul or sensation, but for this one pursuit. It was indeed but a passing trance that only made me feel with renewed acuteness. So soon as the unnatural stimulus ceasing to operate, I had returned to my old habits. I collected bones from charnel houses. There's that charnel houses again. Mm-hmm. And disturbed with profane fingers the tremendous secrets of the human frame. In a solitary chamber, or rather cell, at the top of the house, and separate from all other apartments by a gallery of staircases, I kept my workshop of filthy creation. My eyeballs were starting from their sockets in attending to the details of my employment. The dissecting room and the slaughterhouse furnished many of my materials, and often did my human nature turn with loathing from my occupation, whilst still urged on by an eagerness which perpetually increased. I brought my work near to a conclusion.
I think that if this were written in the modern day, it would be really super gory.
Yeah.
I think this is a very romantic, gothic kind of description. I mean, he's just barely he barely touches on like bones and what he's really doing, but I mean, he's going down to like the morgues and things like that and stealing body parts of all sorts.
Yeah. It's his materials.
Yeah.
An artist needs their materials.
So, and I guess it was probably kind of a gruesome thing. They probably did like,
think about how bad his little workshop smelled.
Oh, God. That's so gross. They said filthy.
The summer months passed while I was thus engaged, heart and soul, in one pursuit. It was a most beautiful season. Never did the fields bestow a more plentiful harvest, or the vines yield a more luxuriant vintage, but my eyes were insensible to the charms of nature, and the same feelings which made me neglect the scenes around me caused me to also forget those friends who were so many miles absent, and whom I had not seen for so long a time. I knew my silence disquieted them, and I well remembered the words of my father. I know that while, this is in quotes, the words of my father, I know that while you are pleased with yourself, you will think of us with affection, and we shall hear regularly from you.
Well, I'm sure, not sure. I mean, he's not eager to tell people what he's doing.
Oh, yeah. You must pardon me if I regard any interruption into your correspondence as proof of your other duties are equally neglected. So that was from his dad. Mm-hmm. I knew well, therefore, what would be my father's feeling, but I could not tear my thoughts from my employment, loathsome in itself, but which had taken an irresistible hold of my imagination. So he's obsessed.
Obsessed.
I wished, as it were, to procrastinate all that related to my feelings of affection until the great object which swallowed up every habit of my nature should be completed. So he's not like you, Laura. Like, you start a project and you might get to it here and there. He is like...
You just had to bring that up.
Yeah, he's all in, man. So he's started this and he can't sleep. He can't think. He's not worried about his dad or his sister, wife, or any of that.
Yeah, if he is worried about it, it doesn't matter because he's going forward. He can't stop.
Yeah. I then thought that my father would be unjust if he ascribed my neglect to vice or faultiness on my part, but I am now convinced that he was justified in conceiving that I should not be altogether free from blame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hindsight's 20/20.
That's right. I'm sure his dad's like, see? Told you.
A human being in perfection ought always to preserve a calm and peaceful mind, and never to allow passion or a transitory desire to disturb his tranquility. I do not think that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception to this rule. If the study to which you apply yourself has a tendency to weaken your affections and destroy your taste for those simple pleasures in which no alloy can possibly mix, then that study is certainly unlawful, that is to say, not befitting the human mind. If this rule were always observed, if no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquility of his domestic affections, Greece had not always been enslaved. Caesar would have spared his country. America would have been discovered more gradually, and the empires of Mexico and Peru had not been destroyed. But I forget that I am moralizing in the most interesting part of my tale, and your looks remind me to proceed. So yeah, the captain of the ship is like, "Come on,
yeah,
man."
He's like, yeah, well, yeah, I get that part, but I just want to know what happens.
Don't talk to me about America and Peru.
That's right. You've just told me that you're reanimating dead bodies, man.
I like that he's like breaking the fourth wall. Like he's in the middle of this story, and then he's like, "I see that you're looking at me." My father made no reproach in his letters, and only took notice of my silence by inquiring into my occupations more particularly than before. He's like, "What are you doing over there?"
But his dad is chill. Like, you remember, they're like these really liberal, parents that indulged the kids all the time.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, he's not being pushy, but he's still like,
what's up?
What's going on over there? Winter, spring, and summer passed away during my labors. It's just season after season.
Wow.
It's already been 2 years.
Yeah.
Winter, spring, and summer passed away during my labors, but I did not watch the blossom or the expanding leaves, sights which before always yielded me supreme delight. So deeply was I engrossed in my occupation. So yeah, see, he's gone from this dreamer, loving life, and now he's just obsessed with his work. The leaves of that year had withered before my work drew to a close, and now every day showed me more plainly how well I had succeeded. But my enthusiasm was checked by my anxiety, and I appeared rather like one doomed by slavery to toil in the mines, or any other unwholesome trade that an artist occupied by his favorite employment. Every night I was oppressed by a slow fever, and I became nervous to almost a painful degree. The fall of a leaf startled me, and I shunned my fellow creatures as if I had been guilty of a crime. So he's like engrossed that he's just like disturbed by like the smallest thing.
Well, and not only that, I mean, I think this is have you ever had that happen? Have you ever been at a point in your life where you're wrestling with a huge decision and you don't know which one is right? Mm-hmm. Which decision is the right one, and you can't even sleep at night. Like you just toss and turn, and like all of a sudden you just sit up like in a cold sweat because you've thought of it in one way, and then the next day you think of it in a different way to change your mind. I think that's what he's doing. He's like really wrestling with his moral dilemma here of what he's doing, but he can't stop.
Yeah. Sometimes I grew alarmed at the wreck I perceived that I had become. The energy of my purpose alone sustained me. My labors would soon end, and I believed that exercise and amusement would then drive away disease. And I promised myself both of these when my creation should be complete. And that is the end of chapter 4.
Oh, it is?
It is.
Oh my gosh. He's gonna that really leaves us hanging.
Yeah. We're like a fourth of the way through or so.
Yes.
So yeah, we're doing real good.
I think I said it at the beginning of this segment, but now I know we've got to be close to seeing the creation.
Yeah, we're about to see some sparks happen, I think, literally. Okay, guys, so if you are following out there in podcast land, we're really glad that you have joined us. We would love it if you came over to YouTube and subscribed to our channel, Fatbird Finds. Our channel is about collecting and reselling vintage collectibles, glassware, like mid-century items.
Yeah, this is just a pause of something fun and different. Like, you know, the book is vintage, but yeah, our forte is flipping.
That's right.
Flippin and Sippin.
Yeah, and we also have a Friday night show called Flippin and Sippin where we celebrate the weekend. We have some fun. We sell some items and play some games. That's Friday night at 9 o'clock Central Standard Time on YouTube. We would love for you to come over and join us. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you give this video a like, leave us a comment, let us know, if you like what's happening so far. Let us know if you want more of these more often or what we should read next. Keep in mind that we do have to read something in the public domain so that we don't get sued. What did you say?
Boone wants to read.
That's right. And if you're on YouTube and you're not subscribed to our channel, we would love for you to do that. It's free and it helps our channel grow, and we would appreciate it.
And also, if you're listening to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform, in the same way, you can follow us so that you know when the next episodes come out, and you can rate us.
Yes, that would be great.
Yes.
Okay, everybody. Hope you have a great day. And as always, make sure you stay tuned to see what Fatbird finds next, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.